The old face in the black wood opened its mouth like something waking from burial. For a moment, no one moved. The torch in Edison Tullett's hand snapped and guttered in the draft, and the fire painted the carved features in trembling gold. The shut eyes, the hollow cheeks, the beard made from pale roots winding through the timber. Beneath all that, deeper than age and rot and the cold stink of a forgotten tunnel, there was a presence, as if the wall itself had bent low to listen. "Who are you?" asked the door. Mira Reed had hauled Bran stark through forest, swamp, snow, and death, and had learned that astonishment was a poor use for breath. Even so, the voice took what little color remained in her face. She shifted the spear in her numb hands and leaned a little closer to Bran's chair, as if the useless wood and iron of it might stand between him and whatever this old magic meant to do. Bran did not flinch. He had long ago begun to wear strangeness the way other boys wore cloaks. His eyes, pale in the torchlight, rested on the face as if he had seen it 100 times before and 100 times after. "Brandon Stark," he said. The lips of the black door peeled back. A long sigh slid through the tunnel, smelling of damp earth and buried roots. Then the face parted down the middle, and the passage yawned wide. Ed gave a low whistle that never quite became sound. "I always hated this cursed place," he muttered, but he stepped aside all the same. Mira bent to take hold of the sled ropes again. Every muscle in her body trembled from old exertion. Cold had settled into her bones days ago and taken up residence there. She had stopped imagining warmth as anything more than rumor. Still, when she dragged Bran through the threshold, a sharper chill passed over her skin. Not the ordinary bite of winter, but the kind that made her think of lakes beneath black ice and things preserved in them. Bran's right arm jerked against the furs over his lap. Mira looked up at once. "What is it?" He did not answer immediately. His mouth tightened in a way that belonged to the boy he had been, brief and frightened. Under the wool and leather on his forearm, the mark the Night King had left upon him flared white-hot, then cold as the heart of the world. He felt it not only in flesh, but in everything around him, in the hidden threads of ancient spellwork stitched into the wall, in the black wood of the gate, in the frozen air under the earth, in the old protections the children of the forest and the first builders had laid down when the world was younger and more afraid. Something gave. It did not make a sound a human ear could hear. Yet Bran felt it as clearly as if a great chain had been cut. For one suspended instant, he sensed luminous seams of power running through the ice above them, delicate as veins in a leaf. Then one seam darkened. Another. The black gate, once alive with a buried grace, seemed to sag inward like flesh after death. Mira studied his face, alarm sharpening her voice. "Bran, it's nothing," he lied quietly. He knew at once it was not nothing. Somewhere beyond the wall, in the trees and wastes where the dead waited, something had stirred in answer. They came out into the south, beneath a sky, the color of old steel. The abandoned stones of the night fort loomed around them, huge and blind, packed with shadow. Snow lay in the broken yards and drifted against ruined stairs. The place had not been loved in centuries. Even crows avoided its towers. Ed stepped through after them, glanced back at the black gate, and seemed to shiver deeper than the cold required. "Right," he said. "I'll take you as far as the King's Road. Then I'm going back to Castle Black before I decide I've gone mad." Mira almost laughed, but exhaustion made laughter feel too heavy to lift. "You're kind." "I'm not kind," Ed said. "I'm doomed. Men mistake the two." Bran tilted his head, not toward the road ahead but toward the north, as if the broken castle had whispered through the snow. The wall rose vast behind them, pale as moonlight and as ancient. To mortal eyes it was unchanged. To Bran, it was not. A place in it had thinned. A lock in it had learned the hand of its thief. Far to the south, at Winterfell, Jon Snow stood in the yard and watched blacksmiths hammer horseshoes and hinges and spearheads, while snow sifted thinly through the gray air. The castle smelled of smoke, wet wool, dung, and hot iron. It smelled of work, which was another word for hope in the north. He had men on the walls, men in the granaries, men mending harness and sharpening blades. He had women salting meat, children carrying kindling, old men patching leather. Every day the cold bit a little deeper. Every day the stores looked a little smaller. He had won back his home and a crown he had never wanted, and all the while winter moved over the world like a slow hand closing. Maester Vulcan crossed the yard with 2 ravens caged beneath his arm. "From Dragonstone, my lord," he called, "and one from the south." Jon took the first message and broke the seal with a gloved thumb. Tyrion Lannister's hand was unmistakable, neat, deliberate, almost mocking in its elegance. Daenerys Targaryen had landed at Dragonstone. She commanded dragons and armies and desired the fealty of the north. She also possessed mountains of dragon glass beneath the island and invited the king in the north to come and discuss terms. The second letter came in a less steady hand and much messier ink. Samuel Tarly, writing from the Citadel, confirmed the dragon glass and urged Jon to go. Beneath the urgency ran something else, a pressure between the lines. Sam was frightened, and Sam had spent enough time with dead things to know what fear was worth. Sansa came up beside Jon before he finished. He did not hear her over the hammering, but he felt her presence the way he felt Winterfell itself. Steady, watchful, built to endure. "What does the Dragon Queen want?" she asked. "What all queens want," Jon said. "A kingdom." Sansa glanced toward the smiths, the yard, the walls beyond. "And if we kneel to one queen to save ourselves from another?" Jon folded the letters. "Then we'd better make sure there's still a world left for kneeling." Sansa's eyes, cool as winter water, stayed on him. She had learned too much too young about beautiful promises and southern alliances. "The North named you king," she said. "They won't thank you for taking a ship south because a Lannister sent a polite letter." Sam sent one too. At that, some of the resistance in her face shifted, though it did not soften. "Then go for the glass," she said at last. "Not for their games." Jon almost answered, but another thought came to him. The reports that had arrived with traders and outriders in the last few days, scattered and uncertain. Empty crofts in the gift. Shepherds found frozen where they stood, though the nights had not yet been that cold. Missing patrols on roads that should have been safe. He had set them aside as winter's mischief. Now they pricked at him. Behind him, the hammering went on. Winterfell had no room for omens. Everything had to become labor before nightfall. On the deck of a great ship off Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen stood with wind tugging at her silver hair, and the island rising black from the sea ahead of her. Dragonstone looked less like a castle than a wound in the earth. Towers shaped like curled claws and crouching dragons thrust up from volcanic rock. Mist dragged itself across the lower walls. The whole place seemed carved from cooled fury. The last time she had seen Westeros, she had been an infant carried from it into storm and exile. Now she returned with 3 dragons, the unsullied and ordered ranks, Dothraki riders like a moving horizon, and a name that had crossed the world ahead of her. She had dreamed of this shore. In dreams it had felt like destiny. In truth it smelled of salt and sulfur, and its welcome was the cry of gulls and the slap of black water against stone. Tyrion came to stand beside her. "Home," he said. Daenerys looked at the castle. "No," she said after a moment. "Not yet." They disembarked without ceremony. No enemy waited at the landing. No banners opposed them. The carved stone dragons along the stairs seemed to stare down with cold old eyes. Inside, the halls were empty save for dust, sea damp and the echo of their own footsteps. At last they came into the chamber of the painted table, where the map of Westeros spread beneath the torchlight in carved wood and color, all the realm reduced to something a hand could cover. Daenerys laid her palm flat upon the painted north. "Shall we begin?" Tyrion asked. She almost smiled. "We shall. Much farther north, where the world narrowed into dark woods and silence, The Night King stood before the sealed black gate beneath the Night Fort. Snow whirled in small, dry eddies around the dead at his back. White walkers sat their pale horses among the trees, still as hoarfrost on branches. The dead men behind them did not shift or breathe. They waited. Where the mark had torn through old power, the gate knew him. The carved mouth opened. No horn sounded from Castle Black. No watchman saw. No raven stirred in its rookery. The dead entered the realm of men, not with siege ladders or dragonfire, but through a forgotten door under a ruined castle, by invitation carried in the skin of a Stark boy. The first to come through were not an army but a knife, a thin vanguard of wights and walkers slipping south beneath the sleeping weight of the wall. They moved through the abandoned yards soundlessly, boots leaving rime on stone. Behind them the rest waited, patient as the grave. For the first time in 8,000 years, winter entered the Seven Kingdoms by a side door. Arya Stark smelled the village before she saw it. At first, she thought it was a midden heap gone sour beneath snow, or a cow dead in its stall. Then the road dipped, the bare branches opened, and the little cluster of crofters' houses appeared in the dusk with no smoke from their chimneys and no dogs barking. The smell thickened into old blood and open bowels and wood smoke gone bitter with damp. She slowed her horse. The wind had teeth. It came in off the fields and cut through her leathers to the scars beneath. She rested one hand on Needle and listened. No voices. No chickens. Not even the ordinary scrape and mutter of people trying to survive a hard season. Silence sat over the place like snow had sat over graves in Bravos, muffling all but memory. Arya had crossed enough battlefields to know when the world had gone wrong. She slid from the saddle without a sound and led the horse between the first two cottages. The door of the nearest stood open on one hinge. Inside, broth had frozen in a pot beside the hearth. A stool lay on its side. Someone had dropped a wooden spoon and never thought to pick it up. On the floor by the table lay a man in homespun with his throat torn half out. Near him, a woman with one arm twisted under her back, and a little boy face down in a spill of dark blood gone almost black in the cold. Arya's face did not change. Her stomach did. She went through the house in swift silence, checked the back room, the shed, the byre. 3 more dead. No sign of looters. No sign of arrows or spears. The latch on the byre was still fastened from the inside. One cow had kicked itself lame trying to get free. Not. Nen, she whispered. She found the first footprints behind the house. Bare feet. Many of them. A trail leading north to south across the field. Not marching in ranks, but wandering in a loose, hungry stream. Some prints were children's. Some belonged to men who dragged one foot. One had no toes. Frost had crept into every print encrusted there. A board creaked inside the house. Arya was moving before the sound finished. Needle came out in one clean draw. She stepped through the doorway sideways, light on her feet, the habit of years making less noise than the cold itself. The man with his throat torn open was standing. He rose with terrible slowness, not like a living man finding his balance, but like something being lifted by invisible hooks. Blood crackled in the rime at his neck. His eyes were blue, bright and empty as winter stars. The woman jerked after him, one arm flopping uselessly, her jaw hanging wrong. Last of all, the little boy pushed up from the floor, blood matting his hair, and turned his face toward Arya. Somewhere in her chest, something old and furious opened. She drove Needle through the man's eye and out the back of his skull. He fell, but the woman was already on her, fingers clawing. Arya slashed across the wrist, ducked under the broken arm, and kicked the corpse backward into the hearthstones. The little boy came at her fast, too fast, mouth opening on a wet hiss. She could not make herself put the sword through his face. Instead, she snatched up the iron poker from beside the hearth and rammed him back into the low, burning embers. Flame caught dry cloth. The thing wherein the boy's body screamed without breath. Arya stared for one heartbeat, then seized the overturned stool and smashed it into the fire, kicking brands across the rushes. The woman lunged and caught a sleeve. Arya hacked downward once, twice, and then the rushes flared and the room began to glow orange. She backed through the doorway, coughing. The horse screamed in the yard. Behind her, the dead thrashed in the growing fire until thrashing became stillness. When she looked up, they were coming between the cottages. Not many. A dozen, maybe two. Enough. A girl in a torn shift whose belly had been opened. An old man with half a scalp. A soldier in rusted mail with no lips. Behind them, more shapes moving in the mist at the edge of the field. They were not running. They did not need to. They had all the night. Arya vaulted into the saddle and drove her heels into the horse's sides. Needle flashed once at the nearest reaching hand. Then they were on the road, pounding south for half a mile before she hauled up and looked back. The house burned hard against the dark. For an instant, the flames made the village look alive. Then blue eyes glittered in doorways and windows as the rest of the dead emerged into the firelight. Arya turned her horse north. She had left King's Landing in her head weeks ago. The queen who sat the Iron Throne had once filled every corner of her. She had lived by that list for years, and vengeance had become so familiar she had mistaken it for purpose. Then Hot Pie had told her Jon was home, and Winterfell had become more real than any death she intended to deal. She had changed roads because of family. Now she changed pace because of fear. Not fear for herself. That had been burned out of her and hammered thin and sharpened until it resembled discipline. Fear for what the dead would find if they kept moving south while the living squabbled over crowns and old injuries. She rode until moonrise and then farther. At Winterfell, Bran arrived with snow on the wheels of his chair and a silence around him that unsettled even the stone of the place. Sansa came down into the yard to meet him, cloak snapping around her in the wind. For a moment, her face lost all composure, and the girl she had once been shone through the woman she had become. "Bran," she said. He looked at her as if from a great distance and a great height. "Hello, Sansa." She embraced him because she could think of nothing else to do, and because there had been too many years when she had thought all her brothers dead. He did not return the embrace, not out of cruelty, but because some part of him no longer lived where touch could reach. When she drew back, a flicker of hurt crossed her expression and was gone. "We thought. I know what you thought." His gaze moved past her, to the battlements, the towers, the white world beyond. "I need to speak with you." She brought him to the Godswood because he asked, and because in the Godswood the castle listened more carefully than anywhere else. Snow lay on the weirwood's red leaves and on the pool below it, a skin of ice tracing the edges where black water showed through. Mira stood beside Bran's chair, hands red and raw against each other, until Bran said without looking at her, "You should go home." The words were plain, almost gentle. That made them cut more cleanly. Mira's mouth parted. For a moment, Sansa thought she would strike him. Instead, Mira laughed once, bitter as frost. "My brother died for you," she said. "I almost died for you. Summer died for you. Hodor died for you. And I'm supposed to go home." Bran's face did not change. "You have your own people." She stared at him a long time, perhaps searching for the boy in the broken shell of the seer. Then she looked away first. "I do," she said. "If there's anything left of them." She left the Godswood without another word. Sansa watched her go, then turned back. "What happened to you?" Bran's eyes lifted to the branches above them, through them, beyond them. "Everything," he said. Wind moved softly over the pool. Somewhere high in the walls, a wolf gave one short bark and then fell silent. "There are dead men south of the wall," Bran said. "Not a great host, not yet. A spear point. They came through the night fort." Sansa frowned. "Through it?" "There is an old gate beneath it. Very old. Magic held it shut to them. I carried the thing that broke it." Understanding came not all at once, but in fragments, each one worse than the last. Sansa's hand tightened around the fur at her throat. "Jon needs to know." "Yes? Why would they come south and not strike us first?" Bran's eyes settled on her. Because Winterfell is stone and warriors and warning. Because south of us are villages and towns and battlefields full of the forgotten dead. Because the Night King doesn't need a victory, he needs numbers. Somewhere in the neck, cold moved over water and made roads where there had been none. The crannogmen heard it first in the reeds at night, not footsteps exactly, but a dry brushing, endless and patient. Nets came up with dead fish frozen stiff. Traps disappeared. Little fires on floating platforms guttered blue and went out. Greywater Watch drifted as it always had, difficult to find even for friends. But the dead did not follow landmarks. They followed life. When they reached a hidden village, there was no trumpet of alarm. Only a wet burst of screams cut short, and the sound of marsh water hardening under an impossible frost. The dead who had been gathered in the snows north of the wall were joined now by river thieves and shepherds, by wildlings who had never crossed, by rangers lost years before, by black brothers whose bones had lain in forgotten cairns, by men who had drowned in bog pools and now walked out trailing black weed. White walkers moved among them like pale shepherds. The small vanguards swelled with every mile, and because they avoided the keeps and roads men watched, the realm did not yet understand what had entered it. At dawn, Arya came upon a shepherd's cart abandoned in the middle of the King's Road. A little girl's doll lay in the mud beneath it, one eye missing, its stitched smile fixed under a dusting of snow. She dismounted, picked it up, and tucked it into her saddlebag without knowing why. The road north lay empty before her, but not for long. In the throne room, the iron beneath Cersei Lannister made a small music every time she shifted her weight. It was not a comfortable seat. It was not meant to be. A ruler who forgot that had already begun to lose. Cersei sat it in black silk and hammered steel, with the crown on her brow and one hand resting lightly on a sword pommel worked into the arm of the chair. Below her, the hall spread red and shadowed, full of banners, guards, and the faint smell of smoke brought in on cloaks from the city beyond. Jaime stood at the foot of the steps with road filth drying on his boots and impatience at his back like another cloak. Beside him, Qyburn's bony fingers moved over a map spread on a trestle, marking villages and the crownlands with scraps of red cloth. "They've stopped answering from Rosby," Jaime said. "Derry as well. Men sent to investigate found bodies. No plunder, no arrows. Some frozen where they stood." Cersei's mouth bent slightly, not into a smile. "It snowed." "It hasn't snowed enough for this." Her gaze slid to Qyburn. "And your whisperers?" "They speak of vanished hamlets, your grace," Qyburn said. "And of corpses that were not entirely dead." A dry ripple of discomfort moved through the courtiers. Cersei let it. Fear was useful if it was aimed. "Peasants tell ghost stories every winter," she said. "The riverlands are full of men who still wake screaming from the last war. If they see blue eyes in the dark, perhaps they should drink less." Jaime's jaw worked. He had spent enough years beside her to hear the difference between contempt and refusal. This was refusal. These reports come from knights as well. Knights can be fools. She leaned back among the blades. Or liars. The North has every reason to spread tales now. Jon Snow wants dragonglass and loyalty, and a queen of his own choosing. Daenerys Targaryen wants me frightened before she tries to land her dragons at my gates. Convenient that the dead begin marching the moment my enemies need me distracted. Jaime thought of saying that the dead had been marching long before any of them had taken crowns. He thought of saying that every child in the North had grown up on stories Southerners laughed at because laughter cost less than preparedness. He thought of saying many things. Instead, he looked at the map and saw how many little red markers there were. "What would you have me do?" he asked. "Take men east and hold the roads to King's Landing. If there are brigands, kill them. If there are refugees, turn them aside until we know who sends them. I won't have the city flooded with panic because farmers in the mud are afraid of the cold." Jaime looked up at her. "Refugees? Every story becomes a crowd, and every crowd becomes a riot." The iron on the throne bit softly as she leaned forward. For just a second, the room around them seemed to disappear, and it was only Cersei and Jaime as they had always been. 2 children who had believed the world might be bent if only they wanted hard enough. "I need order," she said more quietly. "I need grain in the city, gates that hold, and soldiers who obey. Whatever is happening in the crownlands, if anything is happening at all, it does not matter more than the war in front of us." Jaime stared at her. It struck him then that she was not pretending not to believe. She believed what was convenient because convenience was the last country still entirely hers. In the Citadel, snow came as rumor before it came as weather. It came in wet cloaks and the complaints of sailors from the narrow sea, in letters from northern keeps, in the way older maesters began glancing at one another when certain words were spoken aloud. Dead men, cold mists, villages gone silent. The Citadel mistrusted stories. That was one of the things that made it strong and one of the things that made it blind. Samuel Tarly sat in a pool of candlelight so deep and still it felt like a chamber sunk beneath water. Scrolls and books lay open around him in precarious towers. Annals from the Age of Heroes, records of the Night Fort, fragments copied from older fragments, and one cracked leather volume Gilly had found shoved half behind a shelf where no one had cataloged it in living memory. "The letters are fading," Gilly said. She held the book close to the candle and squinted, lips moving as she sounded out the High Valyrian under her breath with stubborn determination. "This says, the wall keeps out that which bears the cold soul, unless invited by breach or mark." "Nay." Sam looked up so fast he nearly upset the inkpot. "Read it again." She did. Slower this time. Little Sam slept curled in a basket beside the table, one fist tucked under his chin, oblivious to all the old terrors men were rediscovering above his head. Sam's skin went damp. The pages were a maester's commentary on much older records, cross-referenced with legends from the north, and a note about the Black Gate beneath the Night Fort. There were doubts in the margins, dismissals, the smug, patient hand of scholarship telling itself it had outgrown myth. Yet under all that lay the same warning in different words. Old magic could be broken by what it admitted. He thought of Bran. He thought of the mark the Night King had left on him. He thought of the wall not merely as ice, but as a woven thing, part spell and part stone. The pieces touched one another and made a shape so awful he wanted to close the book and pretend his hands had not learned it. Gilly watched his face. "What is it?" Sam swallowed. "If Bran crossed through the Night Fort after the Night King touched him..." He stopped and began again because the first version sounded too much like hysteria. The mark might have carried whatever magic was needed. The dead wouldn't have to bring the wall down. They could just go around the places men are watching. Gilly looked at the sleeping child. "Will Jon know that?" "Not unless I tell him." Sam was already reaching for parchment. He wrote to Jon, to Winterfell, and after a moment's hesitation to Dragonstone as well. He wrote not like a maester but like a frightened friend, blunt and urgent. He wrote about the Black Gate, about ancient records, about the possibility that the enemy had chosen cunning over spectacle. When the letters were sealed, he did not feel relief, only more fear. Ravens were fast, but winter was faster. He gathered the most important pages into a bundle. "We're leaving," he said. Gilly blinked. "No?" "Now." At Dragonstone, Daenerys crossed the throne room in silence. The stone seat at its center rose from the floor like the spine of some ancient beast, carved and fused and black. Behind it, the sea showed through tall arches, gray and endless. Wind came in salted and cold, carrying gull cries and storm. Jon Snow had expected grandeur. He had not expected something that looked so much like the inside of a dragon's mouth. Tyrion descended the steps to meet him with a smile that knew too much. "I suspect this isn't how either of us imagined our reunion." Jon, in furs still carrying the smell of the north, looked at him without warmth. "No." Davos stood half a pace behind Jon, hands clasped, taking in every entrance, every guard, every angle from which a man might die. He had walked too many southern halls to trust empty ones. Daenerys entered not long after, cloaked in pale fur over dark fabric, silver hair braided back from a face more composed than kind. She was younger than the name she carried, older than her years in the way of those who had survived too many versions of death. Tyrion made the introductions formal. Titles filled the room like banners. When they were done, Daenerys descended one step and stopped. "You stand in the presence of Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen," she said, "rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Why should I grant you anything before you acknowledge that?" "Nay. Dende. Na. Jon could feel Davos preparing to lie on his behalf. He spared him the trouble, because if we don't fight the enemy to the north, there won't be any Seven Kingdoms left to rule. Her expression did not alter, but her fingers tightened once against the carved stone beside her. "The dead? Yes. So I've been told." It might have gone badly then and there if Melisandre had not arrived earlier that day with her soft voice and red robes and old certainty, whispering of ice and fire and destinies that had a habit of bringing inconvenient people together. Tyrion too spoke for Jon and Davos with his rough honesty, yet none of that carried the force of proof. Daenerys listened. She asked sharp questions. She did not laugh. Jon appreciated that more than if she had agreed at once. By the time they left the room, the question of kneeling was unresolved, the question of dragonglass only half so, and the gap between what they each considered urgent remained an ocean no narrower than the sea outside. That night, on the road to King's Landing, Jaime and 100 mounted men found the first proof Cersei could not sneer away. They were escorting wagons of grain from Rosby under a sky low with dirty cloud. The land there rolled in tired fields and hedges, broken by copses of leafless trees. Dusk had come early, the way it did under winter's hand, and the torchlight among the wagons made gold islands in a gray world. The road ahead seemed blocked by wreckage. Bran rode up beside Jaime and spat. "Cart tipped over," he said. "Could be thieves." Jaime raised a hand for a halt. The cart in the road had indeed tipped. One wheel spun slowly in the wind. Around it lay bodies. At first, Jaime thought they were the thieves Bran expected. Then he saw their faces. Not thieves. Farmers. A woman in an apron, 2 boys scarcely old enough to shave, an old man with a hoe still clenched in one stiff hand. "Stay back," Jaime said. Something moved under the cart. Bran swore softly. The old man stood up. Not in panic. Not like a wounded man climbing after a fall, but in one smooth, ugly rise. Blue eyes caught torchlight. Frost glazed his beard. "Burn it," Jaime said. The order had barely left his mouth when the fields on either side erupted with figures. They came over the hedges, through the ditches, out from the dark under the trees. Men, women, children, soldiers in rusted mail, all moving with the same relentless purpose. A dead horse stumbled forward on a broken leg and did not fall. The first of Jaime's men panicked. The second died. Then the column became chaos. Bran hurled a torch into the nearest dry hedge and fire ran along it like a fuse. Jaime hacked at a reanimated soldier whose mail still bore the Lion of Lannister on the chest, and when the thing fell it tried to claw his boot with fingers chopped half away. "Ride!" Bran shouted. Jaime looked once more at the fields and saw, between the staggering dead, something pale and armored watching from the darkness beyond the fire. Not a corpse. Something colder. He had known many forms of fear. Battle fear, shame fear. The fear of losing Cersei, of losing himself. This was not like them. This was the fear of every old story proving true at once. They left the grain. By dawn, Jaime was riding hard for King's Landing with frost dried in his hair and one dead man's blood frozen on his glove. He no longer cared whether Cersei believed him. Belief had stopped mattering the moment the first corpse had opened its eyes. Dragonstone smelled of salt, sulfur, and old kings. Jon had never liked islands. He liked them less with dragons. The black cliffs dropped straight into a sea always in motion, and the castle itself seemed less built than grown from the rock. Gargoyles stared from corners. Wind found its way into every seam. The very place felt like a challenge issued by dead men. He stood beside the painted table while Daenerys moved markers over carved lands. The torchlight made her hair shine pale as forged silver. Tyrion lounged near enough to advise and far enough to pretend he was not intervening. Missandei stood at the queen's shoulder, composed and watchful. Varys was absent from the room, but somehow present in the knowledge that every word spoken there would already have a path to someplace else. "The North remembers its own dead," Daenerys said. "I respect that, but respect is not obedience." Jon's patience had been flayed thin over the last 2 days. This isn't about obedience. To you, perhaps. To anyone with eyes. A faint smile touched Tyrion's mouth and vanished. Daenerys, however, did not smile. "You ask for my dragon glass, my ships, my men. And in return?" And Jon let the silence stretch. Outside, somewhere beyond the stone, one of the dragons screamed, and the sound raked down the castle walls. "In return," he said, "you'll have fewer dead subjects when the war reaches your shores." Her jaw tightened. "My shores are already at war." He took a breath, fighting the urge to strike the table. "You don't understand. I'm not asking you to choose between me and Cersei. I'm telling you neither of us matters if the dead get south." At that, something changed. Not in her expression precisely, but behind it. Fatigue, perhaps. Or memory. She had crossed deserts and slave cities and funerals to stand where she stood. She had been told since girlhood that destiny could be claimed if she endured enough. It was one thing to fight living enemies who desired your throne. It was another to hear that the world itself might refuse to wait for your conquest. Before she could answer, the chamber doors opened and a guard entered with brisk unease. "A raven, your grace." Tyrion took it first, read, and the color went out of his face. He handed it to Daenerys without comment. Her eyes skimmed the message. "Jaime Lannister claims dead men attacked a grain convoy east of Rosby." "That's not all," Tyrion said. "Varys' little birds report refugees on the roads to King's Landing. Whole villages empty. The Crown's men are turning people back at the gates." Jon felt a grim, humorless satisfaction. He hated it. "Come and see." Daenerys looked up sharply. "You assume I'll risk my dragons because a Lannister wrote a frightened letter. Because frightened Lannisters are usually right about danger when it reaches their own throats. The words would have earned another person death or dismissal." Daenerys only stared at him. Then she turned to Tyrion. "If this is a ploy, Cersei gains panic. If it is not, she gains corpses at her walls. Either way," Tyrion said, "the roads between here and the capital matter." She was quiet for one measured breath. "Ready the dragons." Davos watched them go from the beach. The shadow of Drogon crossed the surf first, vast enough to darken the water. Rhaegal followed, green scales briefly vivid where sun struck them through the cloud. Viserion came last, pale gold and restless, the sea wind whipping around his wings. Daenerys climbed onto Drogon with a confidence that still looked like madness to men raised among horses and hounds. Jon stood below the rise of the sand and felt the dragon's heat in the air before they lifted. "They'll be all right?" Davos asked, as if such a question could be answered. "No," Jon said. The dragons launched. Sand flew. For an instant, the beach became storm. Jaime reached the outer yards of King's Landing shortly after noon, his horse lathered and bloody at the girth where some dead hand had torn at it during the night's retreat. The gates admitted him because he was who he was. No such favor had been shown to the people on the road behind him. They were pressed in a ragged camp outside the walls, thousands already and more arriving by the hour. Farmers with carts and bundled children, merchants leading oxen, hedge knights, septus, beggars, men carrying old mothers on doors. The city had become a promise everyone ran toward and no one could reach. Gold cloaks walked the line with cudgels. The angry murmur of the crowd beat against the gate like bad weather. Jaime went straight to the Red Keep and found Cersei in the map room, one hand on the painted crownlands beneath her feet, as if she could hold them down by touch alone. "I saw them," he said without preamble. "Dead men. A White Walker with them. They're not stories." Cersei did not turn. "So I've heard." "Open the gates." Her head moved slightly. "No." Jaime stared. "There are families out there. There are mouths out there. Panic. ... Disease. Opportunists. And perhaps, if I take your word for it, enemies clever enough to use fear as a battering ram. If I open the gates, the city drowns." "Nah, nonde. If you don't open them, the dead will have an army before sunset." Now she turned. Her expression was not wild. "That would have been simpler. It was perfectly lucid and all the worse for it. Then kill the dead before sunset." He laughed once in disbelief. "With what?" "With the men I still have, the walls that still stand, and the sense not to invite chaos inside them." Qyburn, lurking near the door, inclined his head as if at a point well made. Jaime wanted very much to strike him. "Send for Daenerys," he said. Cersei's eyes went flat. "I will not beg a usurper to save my city." "Your city?" "My city, my crown, my walls. And what will you have left of them when the people outside stand up blue-eyed and beat their own children against the gate?" At that, the mask slipped. Fury flashed through her like a blade. "Enough." Jaime looked at her and knew. Whatever lay outside, she would rather lose the city than surrender the shape of power she had built around herself. There are people who love a thing so fiercely, they kill it with their grip. He had known that about her all his life. It had only become intolerable now that the thing was all of them. He left her to the map and the crown and the dead road beyond the walls. By the time Daenerys reached the crownlands, smoke was already rising from abandoned fields. From Dragonback, the world looked both smaller and more exposed, as if human concealments had been peeled away. Drogon's heat rolled back the freezing wind around her. Below, the roads crawled with people moving toward King's Landing, and farther north, with other things moving south. The dead were not marching in ranks. They drifted through the landscape like infection through flesh, spilling around hills and into copses, converging on any pocket of life. Here a farmhouse burned. There a wagon lay overturned while 3 corpses pawed at the ox still trapped under it. Beyond them, near a frozen stream, a knot of living men had formed a ring of torches around their families and were being slowly pressed inward by the dead. Daenerys felt, more than saw. Jon on horseback far below with the small dragonstone escort that had ridden as near as they dared. He could not see everything she could. That made what she did next feel terribly solitary. She pulled Drogon lower. Flame poured from him in a roaring arc. Dry grass flashed to black. White stumbled into fire and vanished inside it. A White Walker near the stream turned its face upward just before the blast took it. The corpses nearest it collapsed like puppets with their strings cut. Rhaegal descended on the next knot of dead. Viserion wheeled above, screaming. For an hour they burned. For an hour Daenerys forgot thrones and succession and every careful calculation of war. There were only the living and the things that had once been living, and the knowledge that fire, for all its horror, could still be mercy. When at last she turned Drogon back toward Dragonstone, ash clung to her gloves and hair like gray snow. On the ground, Jon rode among the scorched remains. He found bodies burnt past recognition, and bodies preserved by cold where dragonfire had not touched them. He found a dead shepherd girl curled around her little brother as if sleep and not slaughter had taken them. He found the shattered pieces of a White Walker whose armor had broken like glass. When Daenerys landed, he met her without speaking. She slid from Drogon's back more heavily than before. For the first time since he had met her, she looked not regal or furious, but shaken to the roots. "You saw," he said. She gave one short nod. "I saw." Tyrion, who had ridden down from the castle after the first reports, looked between them both. "Then we stopped pretending." "No," Daenerys said, her voice raw from wind and dragon smoke. "We stopped waiting. That night, the first bells rang in King's Landing for the dead. At the Citadel, Sam's departure felt less like escape than theft. He stole books, though not many. He stole knowledge, which the Citadel considered a graver offense. He stole himself away from old men who mistook doubt for wisdom and prudence for virtue. Most of all, he stole time, and time was what the dead were consuming fastest. Gilly wrapped pages in oilcloth while he packed them into a chest with more care than he had ever shown any weapon. The old account of the Black Gate went in first, then the maps of the Neck and the causeways through the crownlands. Then a compendium of dragonglass uses copied from Valyrian fragments. He wished absurdly that he had 10 carts and 20 horses in a year to read. Instead, he had one wagon, a baby, a frightened woman braver than most lords, and the certainty that every day spent under Old Town's bells was a day surrendered. Archmaester Ebrose found him at the stable. "You mean a runoff because peasants have seen corpses in the dark?" Sam was fastening the chest into place. He looked up, face pale, but stubborn. "I mean to go where this matters. Everything matters here." "Not enough." Ebrose drew himself up. "The Citadel does not leap at rumors." Sam thought of the records stacked behind leaded glass, and the chain at his own throat. Each link meant to represent a mastered field of knowledge. Then perhaps that's why the world keeps being saved by people without chains. He regretted the words as soon as he heard them, but only because they would offend, not because they were untrue. They left by noon. The road north from Old Town still held life then. Mule carts, pilgrims, frightened merchants, a few reachmen in green cloaks hurrying south with stories traveling faster than they were. News ran beside the wagon like a mad dog. King's Landing had closed its gates. Villages east of the Blackwater had vanished. Men swore the cold in the riverlands turned milk to ice in the udder. Others said the Queen in the capital had wildfire enough to burn any dead army 10 times over. The lies and the truths tangled until no one could tell them apart. Sam drove on. In King's Landing, the bells had rung so long the sound became part of the weather. Davos Seaworth came through the city in a fishmonger's cart with a hood pulled low, and the expression of a man trying not to count all the ways a plan could fail. He had smuggled onions past blockades, kings past enemies, and himself past execution often enough to distrust ease. Today there was no danger of ease. The streets were choked. Word of dead men on the roads had reached flea bottom in 100 warped versions, but panic cared little for accuracy. Shops shuttered early. Bakers had lines around corners. Women clutched children against their skirts as if hands were already reaching for them from the paving stones. Gold cloaks shouted and shoved and were shouted at in return. Above all this, the Red Keep watched from Aegon's high hill with the aloofness of a thing built to survive the people beneath it. Davos found Gendry in the forge exactly where he expected, stripped to shirt sleeves despite the cold, swinging a hammer into a horseshoe while sparks flew around him. The young smith's shoulders had thickened since Davos last saw him, but his face remained unmistakable. Robert Baratheon's stubborn jaw and black hair reborn in bastard form. "You came back," Gendry said, not stopping the hammer. Davos glanced toward the alley, where the noise of the city pressed close. "And with my timing as poor as ever." "Drop that." Gendry stopped. "Why?" "Because if you stay, you'll be making nails for coffins by nightfall." That got his attention. They made for the river first, because Davos always preferred exits over explanations. But getting anywhere meant crossing the city, and crossing the city meant passing the gates. Near the mud gate, the pressure of the crowd became a physical force. Refugees were jammed shoulder to shoulder outside the barred entrance, while those within the city strained to look through the murder holes and arrow slits. Guards on the wall shouted for order no one could impose. A woman with a child lifted in both arms screamed up at the battlements, promising silver, service, anything. No one answered. An old knight in a torn surcoat hammered the gate with the pommel of his sword until his knees gave out under him. Somewhere farther back, someone cried that the dead were coming. The cries spread with astonishing speed, because panic requires no evidence. Then, The screaming changed. People at the edge of the crowd surged inward with the blind, violent desperation of prey. Davos rose on the wagon bench and saw why. On the road beyond the refugees, figures had appeared through the blowing snow. First a few, then many. Some limped, some ran. One dragged a broken wagon chain. They hit the back ranks of the crowd, and the crowd turned into a slaughterhouse. The guards on the wall loosed arrows. Too late, too few. "Move!" Davos shouted. Gendry did not move. He had gone still, staring at a little boy outside the gate who had fallen in the crush and was trying to rise while boots trampled around him. Davos grabbed his arm. "We can't save everyone." Gendry tore free and vaulted down from the cart with a blacksmith's hammer in his fist. What followed was not gallantry. Gallantry belonged to songs sung far from this kind of mess. It was mud and terror, and the sick, wet sound of iron cracking bone that did not stay down. Gendry fought his way to the fallen child, hauled him by the collar toward the gate, and smashed a blue-eyed corpse's fingers to pulp when they closed on the boy's ankle. Davos, cursing every god that had ever made men, jammed a knife into another dead face and kicked the body under the wheel of a wagon. The gate did not open. Not for children. Not for small folk. Not for men with hammers or smugglers with too much conscience. At last, a postern used by the watch unlatched just wide enough to admit 3 gold cloaks and 2 officers. Davos shoved the boy toward it. One of the officers pulled the child through. Then the door began to close again. Gendry slammed his shoulder into it and held. Davos wedged himself beside him. For one strained instant they kept the crack open while a woman, then an old man, then a girl with blood all down one arm slipped through screaming. Then the officer on the other side drove the butt of his spear into Gendry's face and bellowed for them to let go. The postern slammed. Davos dragged Gendry away before the next wave of the crowd crushed them against the stone. By sunset they were in a skiff under the city walls, rowing for a ship that would never be allowed back into harbor again. Up in the Red Keep, Jaime stood before Cersei, while below them the bells pealed over the city, and the first columns of smoke rose from shanties outside the gates. "Open them," he said again. She stood in a balcony chamber looking down over King's Landing as if it were a game board and not a city full of flesh. "There are dead among the refugees now. That's because we left them there. And if we admit them, there will be dead among us." He felt his temper go cold. Hot anger he could survive. Cold anger was more dangerous. "You're feeding them." Her profile against the darkening sky was beautiful and hard as stamped metal. "I am preserving what I can. What you can preserve is yourself." Cersei turned then, slow and regal and terrible. "Yes," she said. "That is what a queen does." Below them, horns began sounding at the walls. Out beyond the city, in the freezing dusk of the Stormlands, the dead took the first of the lesser keeps almost without pause. A garrison at a rain-lashed tower near the Kingswood fought until lamp oil ran out, and then died in rooms that smelled of wet straw and blood. At another holdfast, a septon tried to lead the people into prayer, and froze with the final word on his lips when the temperature in the chapel dropped so quickly the candles all burst. White Walkers rode past the burning remnants without looking back. They were not conquerors in the human sense. They left no governors, no banners, no terms. Only more numbers. On Dragonstone, Daenerys stood in the painted chamber after midnight, while Tyrion, Jon, Davos newly returned, and Jorah ringed the table with drawn faces. Davos laid out what he had seen at the mud gate in plain, ugly detail. He did not soften it. Men who had once served kings often learned that truth had to be made blunt or it slid off silk. "Cersei is closing the city against its own people," Tyrion said, voice tight with something beyond politics. "She'll let every soul outside those walls die before she opens a gate for fear to walk through." Jon's fist rested on the table over the painted crownlands. "Then we don't wait for her permission." Daenerys looked from one man to the next. In the end, her gaze settled on the carved shape of King's Landing, that little painted knot of stone and pride and history. It had been her father's city. It was the city she had imagined all her life when she said the word home. And she hated the woman who sat in it. "I will not attack King's Landing for Cersei," she said. Silence fell. Then she added, "I will defend it for the people." Outside, thunder rolled over the narrow sea. In the harbor, the dragons were restless, sensing what men already knew. At the mud gate, the first of the dead began beating their hands against the iron-bound doors before the bells had even finished ringing. King's Landing began to die at the gates. It started not with one great breach, but with too many little failures. A watchman on the wall froze when he saw the first child white clawing at the bars and lost the moment in which he should have loosed. 2 gold cloaks at a sally port abandoned their post to help their own families. A wagon overturned in the lower city and trapped the alley behind it. A fire broke out in a tannery and drew men from where they were needed. Panic, once born, became a better saboteur than any enemy. By dawn, the mud gate and the gate of the gods were under assault from outside by the dead, and from inside by the living trying to get to them. The city had become a jar full of hornets. Cersei watched from above in black and gold. Snow whirled over the battlements and settled in the braziers until the flames hissed. Beside her stood Qyburn and Gregor Clegane, one all nerves and calculation, the other mute as a monument. "They are already at the fish market," Qyburn reported. "The lower streets are difficult to hold." Cersei did not look at him. "Use the caches in the outer wards if you must." Qyburn inclined his head. "There are still loyal citizens in those districts. There are dead in them too." Below, the bells went on and on. Jaime rode through the city with 20 men and a face the color of old parchment. He had spent enough nights in battle to know when a line was bending and when it had already broken. Here there were no lines, only knots of fighting flaring and vanishing in streets too narrow for cavalry and too crowded for order. He passed a wine merchant hacking at his own dead apprentice with an axe, a septa dragging 3 orphans toward the hill, a group of gold cloaks pouring lamp oil down a stair while things howled in the dark below. He dismounted at a square near Cobbler's Alley because horses had become a liability. On foot he could smell everything: blood and horse piss, smoke, river mud, burnt pitch, a sweetness from ruptured guts, and beneath it all the iron tang of fear. A girl no older than 12 came barreling around a corner with a dead woman on her heels. Jaime intercepted the corpse, drove his sword through its eye, and shouted at one of his men to take the child uphill. The soldier hesitated, looked toward the Red Keep for orders that would never come, then obeyed. That small obedience felt like a miracle. Down at the harbor, Tyrion stood among the docks and tried not to think of Blackwater Bay as a grave waiting to be filled. Unsullied formed shield lines at the piers, disciplined even in a chaos no training had prepared them for. Grey Worm's commands cut cleanly through the din. Missandei moved among the loading refugees with sleeves rolled and hair whipping loose in the wind, translating, calming, lifting children into boats with her own hands. Davos cursed sailors into courage. Jon, sword bare, helped shove a fishing smack away from the quay even as men in the stern chopped at dead hands clawing over the rail. Everywhere people looked upward. The dragons came with fire and shadow. Drogon's first pass over the mud gate turned the road outside the walls into a furnace. Whites blackened and burst in the blast. Rhaegal screamed above him, banking over the eastern walls to scour the field beyond the Gate of the Gods. Viserion wheeled higher, pale wings dazzling against storm cloud for one impossible heartbeat before plunging down upon a mass of dead near the fish market. The city cheered, not because it loved Daenerys Targaryen. Most there had never seen her. They cheered because for the first time that day something stronger than terror had entered the sky. Daenerys rode Drogon low enough to see faces in the streets below. Mothers clutching babies, butchers with cleavers, guards with blood freezing on their cheeks. Old men kneeling to pray in lanes full of ash. It struck her then with brutal simplicity that a city could be loathsome in the hands of its rulers and precious in the hands of its people at the same time. King's Landing was both. That was why it had to live. She drove Drogon harder. The dead recoiled from dragon fire, but they did not break the way living armies broke. They merely kept coming where flame had not touched. On the northern road, beyond the burning heaps, the Night King sat his dead horse on a rise above the city and watched. Around him, White Walkers waited among standards taken from a dozen dead houses. Behind them, the mass of the army shifted and swelled as more corpses dragged themselves in from the roads and ditches and fields. He had not come for the city itself. Cities were for men. He had come for what cities made in death. The first wildfire cache went up at midday. It began as a green flare under the Street of Flower and ended as a roar that shook half the hill. Stone blew outward. Fire leapt across roofs in impossible color, emerald and lurid and hungry. Men and dead alike vanished inside it. The sound rolled over the city and out across the bay. For an instant, even the dragons seemed startled. Tyrion closed his eyes. He knew that fire. He knew the color of a mad king's legacy. Jon looked toward the hill, jaw set. "Cersei." "Hey," Davos said grimly. "If the dead don't kill us, she means to do the courtesy herself." The wildfire bought them minutes and cost them thousands. It also opened streets the dead poured through, because flames made men flee, and the dead did not fear them until they touched. Jaime felt the blast under his boots from 3 alleys away. Masonry rained into the square. One of his men went down with half his head gone. When the dust thinned, the lower city had become a maze of smoke and green fire. He stared toward the Red Keep for the space of one breath. Then he turned the other way. "There!" A woman screamed from a lane choked with carts. "They're in the houses!" Jaime ran Octol. In the Red Keep, Cersei heard the wildfire and smiled without humor. Qyburn stepped close enough to murmur, "The dragons buy time, but they also drive the dead toward our higher streets." "Then let them," she said. The mountain did not move. Qyburn hesitated. "Your Grace, if the lower city is lost, we may need to consider—" "No." The word was soft. That made it absolute. "I will not flee my capital before a foreign queen and a pack of northern gravediggers. If the city must burn to remain mine, it will burn." She went then to the throne room. She did not do it for sentiment, though sentiment was never absent from her where power was concerned. She did it because the Iron Throne had become the shape of herself in her own mind. To be elsewhere while the city fought and died would make the thing outside her larger than the thing within. Cersei had never survived by allowing that. She climbed the long hall alone, save for the echoing tread of Gregor and the whisper of Qyburn's robes. Snow blew through broken high windows and settled on the swords of the throne. When she reached the dais, she paused, looked up at the monstrous seat forged from conquest, and for one strange instant remembered being a girl in Casterly Rock hearing stories of it, and imagining what a queen's life must feel like from above everyone else. She sat. Down below, Daenerys turned Drogon over the city for another pass, and that was when she saw Viserion falter. He had climbed high, too high, seeking clearer air above the smoke. For one beat of the heart, he seemed almost suspended, pale against the cloud. Then a spear of ice rose from below, hurled with a force that belonged to no human arm. It struck him through the chest. The sound he made was not a dragon's scream alone. It was the tearing of something ancient and impossible. Viserion convulsed in the sky, blue-white frost racing around the wound. His wings beat once wildly, twice, and failed. "No," Daenerys breathed. He fell over the bay trailing fire and blood. The city saw it. The cheer died. Men and women turned upward in horror as the dragon plunged past the walls and vanished into Blackwater with a splash like a tower collapsing. Rhaegal veered, shrieking. Drogon answered with a roar that shook ash from the sky. On the rise beyond the city, the Night King lowered his arm. Daenerys wanted to dive then and there, to tear him apart with fire and claws, to feed him to Drogon alive. But the city burned under her, and the dead were already forcing the breach at the gate of the gods. Rage had to wait for grief, because grief at least understood the need to choose. She banked Drogon back toward the walls. At the harbor, Jon saw the dragon fall, and all the blood in him turned to ice. "Keep loading," he shouted into the panic. Men were already staring skyward instead of shoving off, as if the death of one dragon meant the end of all safety. Perhaps it did, but ships still floated, oars still bit water, and children still cried. Until those things ceased, work remained. Grey Worm took a slash across the thigh and kept his line. Missandei hauled a little girl bodily over a mooring post and into a boat. Davos struck a corpse fingers from the gunwale with an oar. Tyrion, covered in soot, looked once toward the hill and knew with terrible certainty that his sister would choose the throne over any living soul in the city. Jaime reached the outer way below the Red Keep in time to see nobles and servants alike stampeding uphill while smoke oiled around the lower steps. He caught one by the shoulder. "Where is the queen?" "The throne room," the man cried and fled. For 1 second, Jaime stood still in the red dark of the courtyard while memory broke over him. Arisen silk, screaming, burned them all. His own hand on a sword hilt. The feel of king's blood hot on his palm. He had killed one monarch to save a city. Now the city burned because he could not kill another. He began to climb. Halfway up, he heard crying below. Not one voice, but many. He turned and saw a knot of refugees trapped in a side court where fallen stone had blocked the arch. Dead were spilling through the smoke toward them. He looked up at the throne room doors above, then down at the people below. For all the years of loving Cersei, he had believed love itself was a kind of absolution, that wanting one person enough could excuse the rest. Standing there with death in both directions, he understood at last that love which demanded the ruin of everyone else was only another form of vanity. He turned downward. By evening, the lower city was gone. Dead moved through Flea Bottom in numbers impossible to count. Green fire guttered in craters and cellars. The bells had stopped, whether because the men ringing them were dead or because there was no point left. No one could say. The Unsullied fell back by measured ranks to the last piers. Boats overloaded with refugees scraped away into the dark. Drogon and Rhaegal made one final blistering run along the waterfront to clear a path. Daenerys landed at the harbor long enough to dismount. Her boots hit wet boards slick with fish scales and blood. "We're leaving," Jorah said, face gray with smoke and anguish. "Now." She looked toward the Red Keep. Towers loomed through the murk, crimson in the firelight. "Not without everyone we can." A second detonation cut her off. This one came from deep beneath Aegon's high hill. The ground heaved. The lower face of the hill blew outward in fire and stone. The Red Keep shuddered as if struck by a giant's fist. Windows burst. One tower leaned. Another folded inward with dreadful stateliness. Tyrion made a sound like a wound opening. Jaime, far below in the side court, threw himself over a crying child as masonry crashed where he had stood. In the throne room, Cersei looked up at the raining dust and at last understood the difference between ruling a city and possessing it. The difference came too late. Qyburn shrank back. Gregor stepped forward as if his bulk could hold up stone. Then the ceiling came down in a storm of ancient rock and red fire. No song marked her end. Only thunder, smoke, and the breaking of the seat she had loved more than life. The last boats pushed off in darkness. From the deck of a fleeing galley, Daenerys stood with salt spray freezing on her face and watched King's Landing burn. Jon stood a few paces away, every line of him rigid, his eyes on the city and then on the black bay where Viserion had fallen. Neither spoke. Words were too small beside a capital dying. Around them, refugees huddled beneath tarpaulins, coughing smoke, clutching one another, staring at the inferno where their world had been. Somewhere a child asked whether the fire meant dawn. It was not dawn. Near midnight, the water in the bay bulged. A pale shape rose from below, trailing black water and torn flesh. Wings unfurled with a sucking hiss. The dragon's ruined chest glowed blue through broken scales. When Viserion opened his jaws, the fire in them was not fire at all, but the cold light at the heart of a glacier. On the burning shore, the Night King looked up at his new beast and did not blink. Winterfell had never been built for comfort, only endurance. Now endurance was all it had to offer. By the time the ships from Dragonstone and Blackwater reached White Harbor and the survivors began the overland journey north, the castle was already swollen with refugees from the Gift, from the Barrowlands, from villages along the King's Road where rumors had outrun the dead by only a day or two. The great hall filled with strange accents and borrowed blankets. Southern children looked at the stone wolves over the doors as if they expected them to move. Northern women made room at their hearths, because winter did not permit cruelty the way peace sometimes did. Sansa moved through it all with a face composed enough to hold everyone else together. She found corners for the old, broth for the sick, guards for the frightened, tasks for any hands not broken or empty. She learned quickly which southern knights would still obey discipline after losing their queen, and which would drink themselves useless if left unwatched. She doubled the watch on the gates and tripled the count on the grain. She gave orders in the morning and again at midnight because the needs kept changing shape. When Jon came through the gates, covered in road grime and smoke and exhaustion, she went to him faster than dignity would have preferred. He held her hard, and for one moment the castle around them thinned into memory. Children in a yard before death had learned all their names. Arya was there too, standing behind Sansa with needle at her hip and the road still in her posture. When Jon drew back and saw her, a bewildered happiness broke over his face so openly that even in that hour she smiled. "You're here," he said. Arya shrugged because all stronger answers felt dangerous. "I heard home was crowded." He laughed once, rough and tired, and pulled her into an embrace she endured for half a second before returning. Then he looked beyond them to the people filing through the gates, to the charred remnants of city life, bundled in furs and wagon cloth, to the dragons circling high and solitary above the walls. "Where's Bran?" he asked. "In the Godswood," Sansa said. "Where else?" Daenerys entered Winterfell beside him under a silence made from too many emotions to name. Awe, suspicion, gratitude, resentment, curiosity. The North had seen dragons only in stories and terror. Now one of them landed in the yard and folded its wings with an echoing gust of heat, while the woman who rode it dismounted not as conqueror, but as a rescuer covered in soot. The difference mattered. Not enough, but some. Jorah took charge of the Queen's surviving men with the obedience of someone too disciplined to grieve in public. Grey Worm limped, but did not complain. Missandei, eyes shadowed by what she had seen, immediately began asking where the children and wounded were being kept. Tyrion descended from his horse stiffly and looked at Winterfell as if he could see all the ways history would misunderstand what had happened. Behind him came Jaime. The murmur that went through the yard at the sight of him had teeth. They brought him before the assembled lords in the great hall that night, because waiting would only have sharpened suspicion. Torches burned high. Refugees and soldiers pressed the back of the room. Snow hissed against the shutters. Jaime stood alone in the center with one hand of gold and a face that had forgotten pride. Daenerys sat at the high table beside Jon and Sansa, though not on a throne because Winterfell had none. "You served the queen who murdered my father's son and refused to save her own people," she said. "Why should I let you live?" Jaime met her gaze. "Because I'm telling you what she would never admit. King's Landing is lost. The dead have half the crownlands, most of the riverlands, and more from the city than we can count. Because I know how they breached the streets, how the gates failed, where fear spreads faster than orders. Because whatever I was to Cersei, I am not blind anymore." "Many, mine were." A few bitter laughs answered that. "You're a Lannister," one northern lord spat. "Yes," Jaime said, "and that used to be enough for me too." Sansa looked to Brienne, who stood in the shadows near a pillar with her blue cloak still damp from melted snow. "You trust him?" Brienne answered at once. "I do." The hall muttered again. Oaths mattered differently in the north. That too mattered. Then Bran spoke from beside the weirwood seat where they had placed him. He had not been announced. He seemed to appear in the room the way night appeared over fields, quietly, until it was simply there. "He pushed me from a tower," Bran said. Every face turned. Jaime's color went out. Bran went on in the same strange calm. "And yet we need him." The words landed in the room like stones in still water. No one quite knew how to answer them, least of all Jaime. In the end, necessity did what justice could not. Jaime Lannister was allowed to stay among the living because the dead were already too many. After the hall emptied, Jon found Bran in the Godswood with the snow settling on his shoulders, like he could not feel it. "It was you," Jon said quietly. Bran did not ask what he meant. "Yes." Jon stood with his hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to shout. He wanted to shake the truth out of something until blame could hold it. Instead, he looked at the red leaves of the heart tree and the black water below, and understood with a kind of sick clarity that guilt changed nothing unless it became use. "How many?" he asked. Bran's eyes were on some place Jon could not see. The host that came south first was small by his measure. Not now. He harvested battlefields, roads, the city. He let the south ripen. Jon felt the phrase like a knife. "Why not come for you first? He knows where I am." Bran's voice was almost weary. "He thinks I will still be here when he is finished with everyone else." Sam arrived the next morning under a sky low enough to scrape the battlements. He came in a wagon mud-caked to the axles, Gilly beside him half asleep from the road, little Sam wrapped in more wool than child. Jon saw him from the yard and crossed the distance with a grin that turned into something more like astonishment when Sam nearly fell out of the seat in his haste to climb down. "Sam." Sam embraced him hard and briefly, then pulled back with eyes already full of things he had to say. "I brought books," he said. Jon laughed despite himself. "Of course you did. Important books." That afternoon, the War Council gathered around a table scarred by older winters. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Tyrion, Davos, Jorah, Grey Worm, Arya, Bran, Sam, Brienne, Jaime, and the Northern Lords bent over maps of the Neck and the King's Road. Outside, the yard rang with hammers as Gendry and every smith in Winterfell began shaping dragonglass into spearheads, arrow points, knife edges. The smell of hot metal threaded through the castle like resolve. Sam laid out what he had learned at the Citadel. He explained the breach, the Black Gate, the old records that supported Bran's grim certainty. Jaime described King's Landing's fall in a voice that flattened whenever memory pressed too hard. Daenerys spoke of the Night King and the ice spear that had killed Viserion. Tyrion listed what little remained in the south. Not much. Old Town still sent frightened ravens. Sunspear had not yet gone silent. The Eyrie stood inviolate above the clouds, but the realm no longer had a heart. Its largest city was dead. Its roads were graveyards. "The Neck will slow them," one lord said. "No," Bran replied. "It slowed men because men drown and sink and lose the path. He freezes what resists." "Nah." As if called by the words, a horn sounded from the outer wall. All of them went still. An outrider stumbled into the yard minutes later on a half-lame horse, white with frost and fear. "Blue fire!" he gasped. "Over Moat Cailin. They're through." That night Winterfell saw a moving light in the far southern clouds, cold and pale and terrible. The dragon the dead had taken was coming north. Men did their kindest work on the eve of slaughter. Winterfell became a forge and a barracks and a chapel all at once. In the yard, Gendry hammered dragonglass into shape until sparks nested in his hair, and his shoulders ached so steadily he stopped noticing. Arya stood over the workbench and asked for a weapon not found in any armory, describing with her hands something part spear, part staff, meant for movement more than brute force. Gendry looked at her, then at the sketch, and smiled despite the world ending around them. "That's ridiculous," he said. "Can you make it?" He picked up a measure of dragonglass and squinted at the proportions. "Yes." "Then, it isn't ridiculous." She left him to it. He watched her go longer than was useful. On the walls, Tormund cursed the cold as if it might retreat from insult. In the kitchens, Southern women learned northern ways to stretch grain. In the crypts, blankets were laid for children and the infirm, because stone underground seemed safer than the open, even when safety had become a word with too many asterisks. Sansa oversaw every count of food, candles, bandages, arrows. She argued with Daenerys over rationing, not out of hostility but necessity, and found in the Dragon Queen not a fool or a tyrant, but a woman accustomed to command who understood what it meant to spend herself for strangers. They did not become friends in a day, but they ceased being caricatures in each other's eyes. Theon returned with a handful of Ironborn and no certainty left in him but this one thing. Whatever else he had been, he would stand for Bran. He found him in the God's Wood at dusk, under the red leaves powdered white. For a few seconds Theon could not speak. Winterfell had been the place of his betrayal and his childhood, his shame and his longing. Bran, in his chair beneath the heart tree, looked both exactly like the boy who had trusted him and not like any boy at all. Theon sank to one knee. "I'm here to fight for you." Bran regarded him with that ancient distance that somehow made mercy more, not less, startling. "You're a good man," he said. Theon closed his eyes briefly. It was not absolution. It was better. In a chamber above the yard, Sam told Jon the truth of his birth. He did it awkwardly because there was no graceful shape for such news. He told him of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, of a marriage in secret, of a name recorded by High Septon's hand and confirmed by Bran's sight. He told him that the father Jon had hated was not his father, and the father who had died for honor had carried this lie like a wound for love. Jon sat on the edge of the bed and listened without interruption. When Sam finished, silence filled the room to the rafters. "My name is Jon Snow," he said at last. "Yes," Sam answered gently. "And also more than that." Jon laughed once, empty of humor. "That's supposed to help?" "No, but it's true. Truth had always been less comfort than burden in the North." Jon knew that. Still, the knowledge settled on him with strange weight. Not because he wanted a claim, he did not, but because identity once loosened made every memory shift around it. He told Daenerys that night beneath the battlements where the wind cut straight through cloaks and honesty. She listened without moving, her face unreadable in the torchlight. When he finished, the snow between them looked brighter than either of them did. "In another world," she said very quietly, "this would matter more. It still matters." She looked up toward the dark where the southern sky pulsed faintly blue beyond the horizon. Only if we lived to argue about it. She was not wrong. Still, something new and delicate and dangerous had entered the silence between them. Not rivalry exactly. Not yet. The knowledge that after the dead, should there be an after, the world would ask different questions of them both. Below in the hall, Jaime found Brienne cleaning her sword with deliberate attention that fooled no one who knew her. He sat across from her with a cup of ale he did not really want. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She looked up. "Trusting you." He nodded. Brienne considered. "No." He smiled crookedly. "You should have better judgment." "Probably." The smile faded. "I left her." Brienne set the cloth aside. "Yes. I always thought that if the choice came, I'd know who I was before I made it." "And now?" Jaime looked into the ale. "Now I know who I was." That night, while the hall was thick with soldiers pretending not to be afraid, Tormund demanded ceremony for Brienne in the way only a half-drunk wildling could. The thing might have become crude if Jaime had not unexpectedly risen, taken a sword, and asked for her leave with a formality that silenced the room. He knighted her there before all of them. When he said, "Arise, Brienne of Tarth, a knight of the 7 kingdoms," something passed through the hall like a warm draft under a door. Men who expected to die the next day found themselves smiling. Brienne's face broke open with astonishment and contained pride. For a little while, humanity remembered how to honor itself. Toward dawn, Melisandre came through the gate in red. No horns announced her. One moment the snow outside the walls was empty. The next, a single rider in scarlet moved through it with a certainty that looked almost like prophecy given flesh. The guards let her in because no one present wished to explain later why they had kept even one possible flame from entering. Davos met her in the yard with murder in his eyes. "You should have stayed gone. Death does not much concern itself with where I stay," she said. Time had thinned her beauty into something more severe. The red jewel at her throat glowed faintly in the half-light. "The night is long. I am here for dawn." Whether anyone believed her mattered less than that she had come. By afternoon, Jon and Daenerys flew south on Rhaegal and Drogon to see the dead with their own eyes before the final night. The world below them had become a map of injury. The neck lay frozen into strange shining roads where marsh should have been. Villages were black husks. Here and there, lone fires marked survivors hidden in towers or hill forts the dead had not bothered yet to strip. Between all of it moved the host. No number could hold it. From above, the dead seemed almost to be landscape. A pale shifting field seeded with armor and rags, banners and bones, moving over the earth with patient certainty. Viserions circled above them, blue fire smearing the cloud. White walkers rode in loose crescents around the Night King, who moved at the heart of it as if storm and army alike were only expressions of one will. Daenerys felt Drogon tense beneath her, the great muscles gathering at the sight of the stolen dragon. Rage shot through him as cleanly as through her. Jon drew Rhaegal alongside. Even against the cold, his face was stark. He looked down and then across at her, and there was no need for words. One truth had become plain. No wall or trench or line of men would win this war by attrition. They could only cut out its heart. They turned back for Winterfell with that knowledge burning between them like another kind of fire. By the time they landed, the first scouts were coming in with frost on their lashes and silence in their throats. The dead would reach the castle by nightfall. Before the moon rose, the last raven came in without feet. The dead announced themselves not with a roar, but with the absence of every other sound. The wind that had worried at Winterfell all day fell away. Horses in the yard rolled their eyes and went still. Men on the walls stopped talking because something in them, old as the first dark forests, recognized the moment a predator enters sight even before the eyes confirm it. Then the horizon moved. Not much at first. A shiver in the dark. A white restlessness under a sky without stars. Then shapes separated from shadow, and what had seemed like night itself was revealed as rank upon rank upon rank of the dead, stretching from tree line to tree line. Torches flared along Winterfell's walls. Horns sounded once, twice, and were answered. The living took their places. Unsullied held the outer line with shields locked and dragon-glass-tipped spears braced. Northern archers crowded the parapets with black-fletched arrows. Men of the Vale sat mounted behind the trenches, frost shining on helms. Dothraki riders waited farther left, not to charge blindly into darkness as fools, but to harry whatever flanks existed once the enemy committed. Ironborn and a chosen ring of defenders took the Godswood with Theon. Civilians huddled in the crypts below, Sansa among them only until the first fear settled. Then she was back above ground, because command could not be delegated to stone. Melisandre moved before the line with her red robes snapping in the wind. She touched one Eric after another and flame bloomed along the Dothraki steel. She laid a hand to the trenchlighters' torches and fire took them too. Men who had expected only fear found themselves murmuring thanks to foreign gods. Arya spun the new weapon Gendry had forged for her, feeling its balance. Dragonglass gleamed at both ends like trapped midnight. Beside her, the Hound flexed his fingers around a sword hilt and pretended not to watch the dark too hard. "Still hate fire?" Arya asked. "Hating many things," he growled. "Fire's just honest about it." On the battlements, Jon looked once toward Bran and the Godswood. Even from here, the shape of the chair beneath the heart tree was visible, small and still against the snow. Bran lifted his face, as if he could feel the gaze. Perhaps he could. Then his eyes changed, clouding white, and the ravens in the rookery burst upward as one black wave. The dead came. Arrows fell first, a hiss in the dark. Hundreds of them. The front ranks of whites stumbled and rose again with shafts through throat and eye. Dragonglass took some, and then those stayed down. Most did not. Then the host hit the living line with the full obscene force of its weight. No man who had not seen such a thing would believe the speed of it. The dead did not test, probe, or hesitate. They hurled themselves forward in a collapsing, climbing mass, using their own bodies to bridge ditches and surmount shields. The Unsullied held. They held because discipline was the only miracle men can make by practice. Spears punched forward. Shields locked tighter. Grey Worm's commands cracked through the din like whips. Melisandre raised both hands. The trench went up in a ring of orange light. For a heartbeat, the world became manageable. Fire ran along the prepared oil and pitch and caught the dragonglass scattered in the ditch, turning the line into a wall of brightness the dead recoiled from. Men on Winterfell's walls shouted. Hope rose sharp and foolish and unavoidable. Then Viserion screamed above the clouds. Blue fire ripped down on the east wall. Stone burst. Men vanished. Ice blossomed over parapets where flame touched. Rhaegal and Drogon rose to meet him, and suddenly the sky held its own war. One living dragon green and one black and one dead and pale. All of them immense, all of them fire and fury and the memory of empires. Jon rode Rhaegal awkwardly but not without instinct, the dragon somehow knowing him beyond training. Daenerys on Drogon moved with a savage grace born of hard miles and harder losses. Below, the dead tested every part of the line at once. The Dothraki did not charge into oblivion, but they fought as the storm riders they were, sweeping along the flanks where the dead thinned and cutting down stragglers before wheeling back. It bought time. No more. The host was too deep. When the first whites began hurling themselves into the trench until their own bodies smothered the flames, time itself started to look finite. Jaime fought near the western breach beside Brienne and Podrick Payne. The gold hand made some motions clumsy, but there were no clumsy choices left, only necessary ones. He drove steel through a dead man's mouth, kicked another from the pile, and heard Brienne shout his name once in warning before an axe meant for his neck bit into the corpse he had not seen. They fought back to back for a stretch that might have been seconds or a year. On the inner wall, Sansa refused the crypt again until smoke and shattered stone made staying above idiotic. She went below only after ordering the last reserve of archers to the north stair. In the crypts, fear had a different sound. Muffled weeping, whispered prayers, the awful politeness of strangers trying not to panic their children. Tyrion was there among them, not because he wanted safety, but because too many others needed someone to meet their eyes and pretend he still understood the shape of plans. The first corpse rose from a cracked Stark tomb behind them. A woman screamed. Then another tomb lid shifted. Then, a third. The dead were old here, long bones and ceremonial wrappings, but old dead were dead all the same. One skeletal hand punched through stone loosened by age. A child began shrieking. Sansa turned with a dragonglass knife in her fist before she consciously remembered drawing it. The first ancient corpse that lurched free still wore the rusted remnant of a bronze crown. She buried the knife under its jaw. Tyrion, who had once thought himself useless in a fight, and was not entirely wrong, seized a fallen torch and jammed it into another opening tomb. Up, he barked to the nearest family. Move! Above them, Winterfell's outer yard was lost. The dead spilled through the smothered trench and over the broken east wall in a tide of limbs and rime. Grey Worm ordered the retreat with unbearable precision, sacrificing rank after rank of Unsullied to let the rest pull back through the gatehouse. Men died obeying. That, too, was a kind of love. Jorah found Daenerys when Drogon was forced down beyond the walls. It happened in a chaos of wings and fire. Viserion's blue flame clipped Drogon across the neck. Drogon shrieked and crashed into the field just outside Winterfell's main gate, scattering dead under him but trapping Daenerys on the ground when she slid from the saddle. Whites converged at once. She drew a sword she hated using and cut because there was no time to hate anything. One dead rider went down. Then another climbed over it. Jorah came out of the melee like a man crossing from one life into another, shouting her name. He put himself between her and the dead without hesitation, as he always had between her and any ugliness the world meant to offer. They fought side by side in the snow while Drogon, wounded and enraged, tore corpses apart with jaws and claws. On the wall above, Jon saw them and turned Rhaegal downward, but Viserion struck again from cloud and ice and dragon flesh and storm, all tangled in a shriek that made reason impossible. Rhaegal met the dead dragon hard. The two beasts locked in air over the godswood for one hideous suspended instant, then separated, trailing blood and blue flame alike. Rhaegal's wing tore. He fell behind the battlements out of sight. Jon hit the ground hard enough to see sparks. When he got up, Longclaw was still in his hand and Winterfell was everywhere ending. Bran remained in the godswood. Snow gathered in his hair and on the fur over his knees. The Ironborn around him tightened their circle as the sounds of battle drew closer. Steel, screams, the weird dry chattering of the dead. Theon stood in front of Bran's chair with spear in hand and fear plain in him. But he did not step away. Bran was elsewhere. Through ravens he rode the storm over Winterfell. Through the trees of the godswood he felt roots, an old memory, and the way cold moved like intent through ground and stone. He saw the Night King dismount from Viserion's fallen shadow beyond the broken wall. He saw White Walkers closing behind him. He saw Arya moving across the castle interior like a thrown knife, faster and quieter than panic itself. He saw Jon staggering through the yard toward the godswood with blood on his face. He saw Theon bracing himself for a moment he had always been running toward. Then Bran called the ravens down. They came screaming from the dark and swarmed the Night King in a black frenzy of wings. It did not hurt him. Hurt was not the point. For one breath his view narrowed under the storm of feathers and beaks. That was enough for Jon to reach him. The sword of House Mormont met the spear of winter with a crack like a frozen lake breaking. Jon had imagined this fight in nightmares, and none had prepared him for the sheer force in the Night King's first blow. It drove him to one knee. Frost bloomed up Longclaw's steel. Jon recovered, slashed, and sparks of blue-white fire burst where Valyrian steel met ice. The Night King turned the stroke aside and answered with something not quite a stab and not quite a cut. A movement too quick and clean for human imitation. Jon barely caught it. Pain ran up his arm to the shoulder. Around them, Theon and the Ironborn were dying. White Walkers came forward but did not yet interfere, as if their master desired the kill himself. Daenerys reached the edge of the godswood from the other side, with Drogon at her back and Jorah bleeding badly beside her. She saw Jon engaged, and the Night King between tree and pool, and did the only thing available. Dracarys! Fire swallowed the clearing. Snow flashed to steam. Weirwood branches thrashed in the heat. Theon threw an arm over Bran's chair. Jon stumbled clear at the edge of the blast, coughing. When the flames rolled away, the Night King still stood. Dragonfire licked off his armor and went out. He looked at Daenerys with something colder than triumph. Not contempt. Certainty. Jorah made a sound like despair and charged. Whites took him before he was halfway there. Theon had no men left now. He looked back at Bran once. Bran's gaze returned to the world at last. Human, for the first time in hours and perhaps years. Theon, he said softly. Thank you. That was all. It was enough. Theon screamed and ran at the Night King with his broken spear. The Night King caught the shaft, snapped it, and drove the splintered end back through Theon's armor. Theon fell at Bran's feet, blood darkening the snow, and did not rise. The godswood went very still. Arya was already there. She had crossed the battlements, the gallery, the ruined library, the roofline over the North Walk, all in a blur of instinct and training and the one fierce purpose that had once been vengeance and had become something cleaner. Sandor had bought her a passage through the last corridor with fire on his sword and terror in his throat. Melisandre, encountered for a heartbeat in the smoke, had looked at her with eyes full of old recognition and said only, "Not today." Now Arya moved through the branches behind the Night King, lighter than falling snow. Jon saw her first and almost shouted. Then he saw the angle and did not. The Night King turned toward Bran, hand-reaching. Perhaps he meant to kill memory itself. Perhaps he meant simply to end the one witness who could see him clearly. He never completed the motion. Arya came out of the dark with the cat's paw dagger in her raised hand. He caught her by the throat with impossible speed. Her feet left the ground. The dagger fell. For one frozen instant, it seemed the story had chosen the cruelest possible ending. Then the dagger dropped from Arya's right hand into her left. She drove it up under the Night King's jaw. The sound was small. A crack, a gasp of old ice breaking far underground. Blue light burst through the seams of his armor. The hand around Arya's throat spasmed. His body began to fissure from the wound outward, lines of pale fire racing over him like lightning through frozen water. Then he shattered. Across the field, across the walls, across the crypts and the yard and the frozen roads beyond Winterfell, the army of the dead collapsed. Whites fell where they stood. White walkers burst into glittering shards that blew away on the wind. Viserion, high over the castle with blue fire gathering in his ruined throat, came apart in the sky like glass struck by a hammer. Fragments of frost and bone rained into the snow. The scream of the dead ended all at once, so completely that the dawn sounded loud. Silence after battle had its own weight. It lay over Winterfell, and the fields beyond like a second snowfall, settling into armor joints and shattered stone, and the space where screams had been. Men moved through it slowly, as if loud sound might wake the dead again. The dawn came pale and honest over a world wrecked past vanity. They found Jorah first beside Daenerys, one hand still turned as though it had tried to rise again for her. She knelt in the snow and touched his face without tears at first. Tears came later, when no one watched. The grief was too old and too intimate to make spectacle of. He had crossed the world with his love turned into service, and his service turned into redemption. In the end, he had died where he most wished to stand. There was mercy in that, though not enough. Theon lay in the godswood with red leaves above him, and the broken spear still through his mail. Sansa and Arya came there together. Bran sat a little distance away beneath the heart tree, quiet, as if listening to all the names the roots had received. Arya bent and closed Theon's eyes. Sansa stood looking down at him for a long while. "He saved us," she said. "It was not forgiveness and not a ledger balanced. It was better. It was true." Funeral pyres filled the yard by evening. Northmen and Dothraki, unsullied and men of the Vale, Ironborn and river lords and nameless refugees from the city, all burned under the same darkening sky. There were too many bodies for perfect ceremony. That too wore stole. Still they did what dignity allowed. Names were spoken where they were known. Where they were not, the silence after the flames took them served as witness enough. Jon lit the pyre for those of the north. Daenerys lit Jorah's. Grey Worm stood rigid beside the fire that took many of his own men, his face a carved thing no grief could publicly crack. Brienne lit the pyre for Podrick's fallen brothers in arms, and later watched Jaime move among the wounded with bandaged shoulder and ash on his cheek, no longer a man made chiefly of his worst love. When the pyres were roaring and sparks lifted toward the stars, Tyrion stood beside Sansa at the edge of the yard. Neither spoke for some time. "There is no capital now," he said at last. Sansa watched the flames. "Then perhaps the next one will be built by people who remember what cities are for." He looked at her and thought how much pain it had taken to make her this clear-eyed. That would be new. Good. In the days that followed, the work of the living began again. The dead in the fields had to be burned before thaw. The wounded needed tending. Surviving holds had to be contacted. Ravens flew south and east and west, carrying not commands so much as proof that dawn had returned. Oldtown answered first, then the Eyrie, then Sunspear after a long and anxious gap. The south was maimed, not erased. King's Landing was gone. Much of the riverlands lay empty, but islands of life remained like embers after a house fire. capable of taking flame again if guarded. A council gathered in Winterfell because there was nowhere else fit to gather it. Daenerys came into the hall without crown or pretense. Jon sat beside her but not below. Sansa took her place for the north. Tyrion stood rather than sat. Perhaps from habit, perhaps from humility. Jon Royce spoke for the Vale. A raven's words from Old Town were read aloud. Gendry, legitimized by no one yet but known by enough, listened with a smith's attention and a lord's new uncertainty. "There is no Iron Throne," Tyrion said. "No Red Keep. No city to bind the kingdoms by fear or trade or bureaucracy. We can spend the next years killing what survived over whose claim remains pure. Or we can admit that the dead have already mocked that question." Daenerys looked around the hall. In another life, she might have contested every syllable. In this one, she had watched the city she had once wanted most collapse before she ever held it. Desire had burned and left something harder and sadder in its place. "I crossed the world for a throne," she said. "There isn't one. I will not build another from the bones that remain." The hall remained very still. "The North will remain the North," Sansa said, meeting her gaze without apology. Daenerys inclined her head. "Then it shall." There was relief in the room and caution, and the first awkward shape of a peace no one had imagined before needing it. The surviving regions would govern themselves and bind themselves in alliance against famine, raiding, and whatever else winter had not yet finished. Dragonstone, still defensible and supplied by sea, would serve as a southern seat for relief and rebuilding, not dominion. Gendry Baratheon would be named to Storm's End if he wanted the burden. Riverrun would be restored if any Tully strength remained to claim it. The Iron Islands could be Yara's if Yara could hold them. The realm that emerged would be looser, poorer, humbler, and perhaps because of that less mad. After the council, Jon found Daenerys on the battlements where dusk turned the snow violet and gold. "You gave up what you wanted," he said. She watched Drogon on the far field, the last living dragon folding his wings around himself beside a line of pyres gone cold. "I wanted a home," she said. "I mistook the throne for one." Jon did not answer immediately. Some truths improve in silence. At last he said, "What now?" She smiled, though grief still lived beneath it. "Now we learn the harder thing." "Which is?" "How to build something that doesn't need fear to hold it up." He looked south, where the road ran through the white world toward ashes and work. "That sounds worse than war." "It probably is." This time he smiled back. Arya left Winterfell with the first spring caravan, not west, not yet, but south to see what remained and what maps would need redrawing. She kissed Sansa's cheek, clasped Jon's forearm, stood a little awkwardly before Bran as if farewells with him required translation, and then mounted with Needle at her side, and the world once more open ahead of her. She had spent too long being sharpened for death. Now there were roads where survival itself required curiosity. Jaime chose to ride for the riverlands with Brienne and a small force to clear roads and escort survivors north and south as needed. He went not as lord or hero, but as a man finally interested in earning the world he inhabited. Brienne went because duty and care had become too interwoven to separate. Sam settled for a time in Winterfell's library with Gilly and Little Sam, and a mountain of damp notes, because someone had to write this down before memory made it neat. Bran helped where he could, though what he could do had little to do with ink. Spring came slowly. It began not with warmth but with dripping. Icicles shortened. The snow on south-facing stones thinned. One morning, a child from King's Landing, now fostered among northern kitchens, shouted to hear water running under the bridge. Men stopped to listen as if the sound were music. Weeks later, Jon and Daenerys rode south together as far as the blackened outskirts of the capital. What had been King's Landing was a scar of stone and ash above a glittering bay. Parts of the walls remained. Great sections of the hill were gone. The Red Keep had collapsed into itself, leaving jagged towers and heaps of red ruin. Grass had not yet returned. Smoke no longer rose. Gulls nested where kings had ruled. They dismounted among broken masonry and walked in silence. At last Daenerys stooped and picked something from the ash. For a second Jon thought it a piece of iron from the throne. It was not. Only a child's metal toy horse, blackened on one side, one wheel gone. She turned it in her hand and then set it carefully atop a stone. "There is no throne left," she said. Jon looked over the ruin, the bay, the long roads beyond. "Then maybe we have a chance." She took his hand, not because that solved anything, but because it did not have to. Far behind them and far ahead the land went on. In the riverlands, crocuses pushed through soil that had drunk too much blood. In the stormlands, men cleared deadfall from roads under a sky suddenly full of birds. In the north, children who had seen too much began again to chase one another through courtyards. Under the heart tree at Winterfell, Bran listened to the sap rising in old roots and to the faint green insistence of a world that, against all evidence, still wished to live. The south had gone first into darkness. The dawn that returned belonged to all of them,